So we saw how many originators we have here today. We saw how many real estate professionals. How many settlement or title companies do we have represented here today? A few. Very good. There's one other class of people we need to find out about. How many of you will consider new employment in a new field come August? There you go. I'm with you. So I have to put this little background bio up here for you because I want to make sure everybody is very clear. I was not the opening act for the Rolling Stones on Sunday. Nor did I play for the Washington Redskins and was drafted in 1984. So I'm 30 plus years in the business. I'm Chief Operating Officer at Sierra Pacific. I have compliance, technology, and operations reporting up to me. And this is a very, very important part of our life, what I'm going to talk to you about today. So everybody has a legal disclaimer, and this is mine. I want to start by saying I am not an attorney. Notwithstanding the foregoing, this workshop is presented with a word of caution. This presentation may cause restlessness, nausea, dizziness, or blurred vision. Some humor may or may not be present, some may laugh, and some may actually cry, based upon the information I'm going to present. The opinions expressed here are solely mine or my wife's, not necessarily those of my employers, past or present, or my friends or those fanatical fantasy football partners of mine. This presentation is subject to change without notice and is void where prohibited by law. No animals were harmed in the making of this presentation, especially my dog Sadie. If this presentation lasts more than 4 hours, please seek immediate help. So, this regulation was passed about 15 months ago. Since that time, I've attended three workshops put on by the Mortgage Bankers Association of America, as well as the American Land Title Association. I've attended an all-day workshop put on by one of our Washington, D.C. legal firms. I've attended countless online webinars. I participate in a conference call with peers every 2 weeks on this subject. And every conference, every event, every presentation I look at, read, and digest, I learn something new. This really is a very complex regulation that's going into effect, and it's going to take some time for the industry to absorb it. So what I'm going to do today, I'm going to move through this presentation rather briskly. I want to make sure we have plenty of time for questions at the end because there will be plenty of questions. Most of which I will be able to answer. Those that I cannot, I will refer to the CFPB, who will respond to you at your next audit. We're going to cover 4 aspects today. We're going to look at the rule overall in general. We're going to look at the 2 new forms, one called the loan estimate, and how that impacts our origination process, the closing disclosure, and there's another rule. Loans originated prior to August 1st fall under the old disclosure documents. Why is there a change? It's really been directed by our friends Christopher Dodd and Barney Frank with the Dodd-Frank law, and it was put into effect by the CFPB. They spent over a year doing extensive industry outreach, outreach to consumers, and once they put the regulation together, they actually did consumer testing on over 800 consumers, who all found that the disclosures actually do present a better, clearer picture of the transaction and the costs involved in the transaction. So it's easier for the consumer to locate some key information about the loan and the process. What's changed? Several key areas have changed. First, there's a new definition of loan application that we'll go into. It combines the initial GFE that we know and love today, the truth in lending disclosure, into a single document called the loan estimate, or LE. It combines the final truth in lending disclosure and the final HUD-1 into a new document called the CD, or closing disclosure. There are new timing requirements around issuing both of those documents. There are new tolerances or variations around the costs and the fees. And the creditor or lender, and I'll kind of use those interchangeably today, has greater responsibility for both of these documents. So what loans are impacted? Almost all closed-end first and second mortgages. It covers consumer construction, construction of term and vacant land loans. It does not apply to HELOCs, reverse mortgages, mobile home loans which are not attached to real estate, and it does not apply to certain down payment assistance seconds where there's no principal or interest payments and the loans are forgiven over time, partially or in whole. Under the rule, the application has been defined now as receiving 6 pieces of data. Once you have the consumer's name, their income, their social security number, property address, an estimate of the value of the property, that's not an appraisal, just somebody's opinion, and the loan amount they need, you are now required to issue the loan estimate. Today we have a 7th catch-all type of requirement that every lender can self-define, so it gives us greater flexibility today about when we have to issue our GFEs. Under the new regulation, we lose that flexibility. So once you receive those 6 items, you now have to issue the loan estimate. And this applies to both the lenders and the mortgage broker. So the pre-application disclosure opportunities, typically when you're talking to buyers and doing a pre-qualification or a pre-approval, they want to know what the costs are. You can still use a worksheet to provide those costs so they can see what the costs are and what the down payment is going to be. But it cannot look or resemble the loan estimate in any way. And it must contain a very specific disclosure in a minimum 12-point font that says your actual rate, payment, and cost could be higher. Get an official loan estimate before choosing a loan. And you can only collect, much like today, you can only collect a credit report fee in advance, which means you cannot even collect a post-dated check or credit card information to use later. And that's actually defined and spelled out in the regulation itself. Purchase borrowers who are shopping, so in your systems, as long as you use property address as TBD, then you don't have that 6th element. You don't have to issue a loan disclosure or a loan estimate. You can use your worksheets, treat them as prospects in your system, convert them to an application when you have that final element. Refinance borrowers who may be interested in refinancing are going to be a little more trickier because they'll know the property address, they'll know or have an estimate of the value. So you have to be careful about when you might capture those 6 data elements. Website applications, you got to take a look at your website applications because if you capture those data elements and they hit the submit button, you now under the regulation have a loan application that must be disclosed upon. And we all know that, or let me just ask this question. We all get 100% conversion of our web applications, don't we? Sure. So when you have an application, the LE, the loan estimate, must be delivered no later than the 3rd general business day after the application is received. Now that's interesting because they've gone so far now as to have 2 definitions of a business day in this regulation. The general business day means any day that the creditor or the broker is open for business for substantially all of their business opportunities. So that basically excludes Saturdays. Most companies are not open officially for business on a Saturday. We don't underwrite, draw fund loans, or do loan locks, or have secondary marketing activities on Saturdays. Although many times our people work. So for us, the Sierra Pacific, we will not use Saturday as a general business day. That's actually a good thing because if you take an application on a Friday, you don't have to count Saturday. So now you have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday to do your disclosures. You had to count Saturday, and you'd have Saturday when nobody's might be there, Saturday, Monday, Tuesday. You lose a day. So that's actually a good thing. General business day applies to all the issuance of the loan estimates. The first one and any subsequent loan estimates that are issued, you use the general business day. Now the consumer must receive the loan estimate before they can provide you an intent to proceed. That's very important. And you cannot require, even more important, you cannot require any confirming documentation until you issue the loan estimate. Now you can ask somebody if they'd like to provide you check stub or W-2s or the purchase contract, which might be important, but you cannot require that data. So how is the LE received? 3 ways. Face-to-face, obviously, you can provide the loan estimate. There's a place for the borrower to acknowledge it as received. That now reduces all the time frames down, and you can proceed with everything. There's electronic delivery, which we plan to use at Sierra Pacific. The important thing here is that when you do an electronic delivery, you must make sure you get the e-consent documentation signed first, so the consumer is consenting to electronically signing forms. Then you can provide the documents. There's what's called a mailbox rule in this regulation, which basically says the application on Monday, then you have to produce that by Thursday. When you produce it, you may request verifying information, and then the consumer receives it 3 days later and can indicate their intent to proceed. Obviously, this can be shortened, like I said, by acknowledgement from the consumer. So if you're doing it face-to-face or you're using electronic delivery, you can reduce that time frame. So we're going to look at the loan estimate in detail. There's 3 pages. This is page 1. And you'll see as we go through this, actually most of the information that really is important to the consumer is on the first page of this document. So at the very top, excuse me, at the very top of the form, you have information about the creditor name and their contact. Now that's the creditor. If you're a mortgage broker, that's not your name, that's the lender's name. You have the date issued, property address, sales price, loan terms, the purpose, the product, fixed rate as an example, loan type, conventional, FHA, VA, USDA, a loan ID number, and I'll talk about that in a second, and whether it's rate locked, yes or no, and if it's yes, the information around the rate lock. There's a couple of key things that really present obstacle for our industry. The creditor name. Now the creditor name, the regulation says the creditor name can be blank. So the document could be issued by a broker without the creditor name. The problem is they didn't carry that thought process quite all the way through. The loan ID number must be the same throughout the entire transaction. Yes, that does present a problem. Which means the loan ID that's on this very first document has to be the same on the very last document. So that obviously presents a problem. Next section, loan terms. Now here you see the information about the loan amount, interest rate, monthly P&I, if there's a prepayment penalty, yes or no, balloon payment, yes or no. I find it interesting that the CFPB, in their example, which this is coming from, uses a prepayment penalty. I'm not sure about you, but we haven't done one of those in a while. The next section now, you have projected payments. This is a very interesting section because now the form becomes a little more complex. In this example, there are 2 columns. You see projected payments for years 1 to 7, which are principal and interest, mortgage insurance, and estimated escrow amounts. Then you see years 8 to 30 with no mortgage insurance because it's fallen off. Well, the challenge is, this form has to go from 1 column to as many as 4 columns based upon your loan type. If you have a fixed rate 80% loan, you will have 1 column on this document. If you have an adjustable rate arm with mortgage insurance, you'll very likely have 4 columns on this form. So the first challenge for the industry in our technology group is having the form dynamically change, going from 1 to 4 columns. The other interesting thing on this form is if you look at it carefully, you'll see some numbers. P&I have got 2 decimal points, 768.28, I think. But the total payment has no decimal points, $1,050. So the regulation is very specific. Certain fields are rounded up, certain fields go to 2 decimal points. Certain fields can go to 3 decimal points, except if it's nothing but zeros, there's no decimal points. So 3 and 7/8 is 3.875, 4% is 4%, no zeros. very specific in the regulation. Finally, at the bottom, there are two numbers: estimated closing costs, which come from page 2, which we'll look at next, and estimated cash to close. So on this one page, the consumer can see what his payments are going to be over the life of the loan, how much cash, what are his closing costs, how much cash does he need to close, what kind of loan is he getting, and is it rate locked, yes or no. This will probably be the one page you look at. You might not even look at the next 2 pages. But that remains to be seen. Page 2, we get into the detail of the origination costs. So the very top, now, today we deal with blocks 1, 2, 3. Those are gone. Now it's ABC. Don't ask me. Block A, very similar today. Block A, origination charges. These include discount points, origination fees, any costs paid by the consumer directly to the originator or the creditor, application admin, underwriting fees, and there's no variation or tolerances allowed in this box. So these are items that can't change. Now they can change due to a changed circumstance. If a program changes, if the loan amount changes, the borrower goes from a 30-year to a 20-year, those numbers can in fact change based on that. But you can't change and say, gee, my $500 processing fee, I'm going to go to $400 to save the guy $100. No, can't do that. The next box, box D, these are services the consumer cannot shop for. These are things required by the lender or the broker, but the consumer isn't allowed to shop for or pick themselves. These things cover things such as appraisal fees, credit report fees, tax service fees, flood cert fees, etc. The other thing, and I didn't mention it before, because it does apply to all the boxes, the fees, as you can see, are very nicely listed in alphabetical order. That is a requirement by the regulation. It must be listed alphabetically. These fees in this box, services the consumer cannot shop for, have no variation unless through a changed circumstance. That means when we quote these fees, they can't change unless through a valid change circumstance. The next box, box C, these are items the consumer can shop for or can select. Pest inspection fees, surveys fees, title insurance, buying title settlement side of the business, and certainly the real estate sales professionals in here know that one title company or one settlement agent will have one type of fee, another type of fee over here. Might be courier fee over here, might be delivery fee over here. Well, whatever we call it here, we have to call it all the way through the transaction. Well, that's not that hard to do, except let's look at the process, and we'll talk about this a little bit in a minute, but I think it's important here. In reality, your mortgage brokers, your mortgage lender partners, they have pre-qualified your borrower. They have quoted some fees, some costs. They get the call Friday night. Hey, meet me in the morning. Our offer's been accepted. Let's go. So they now have 3 days to produce that LE. They cannot require to receive a copy of the purchase contract before they issue that LE. In reality there, so they can get it optionally. They could call their real estate partner and get it, but you can't go to the borrower and say, you have to give me a copy of the purchase contract before I can do this document. You can't do that. So they can't produce the LE, but whatever they name those fees are going to have to be consistent. And that's going to be a challenge, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. Then at the bottom is box D, which is just the total of A, B, and C above. Then we go to the other side of the form. Start with E. That's your recording fees, any other taxes paid to the government, transfer taxes. Now you'll see here, there are no transfer taxes on this particular form. And you'll see when we look at the closing disclosure in a few minutes, that there are transfer taxes there, but they were paid by the seller. So transfer taxes only appear here if they're going to be paid by the buyer. Then you have prepaid items. Your prepaid items mainly are homeowners insurance or possibly mortgage insurance. Obviously prepaid interest, which everybody knows, covers interest on the loan from the date of closing up to the end of the month. Next section is escrow impound amounts that would be collected at closing. Any other costs would be listed under H. Here's an interesting little thing. You see title, owner's title policy, optional. Regulation has defined that if there's owner's title policy, which is different than the lender's title policy, it has to be shown in this section, has to be shown as an optional coverage amount, and it has to be shown at the full cost amount, not the discounted amount. Because we all know that if you're purchasing the LTA policy and the lender and the owner's policy at the same time, you know, our title partners are very nice and give us a discount. Pass that discount along. We can't show it that way. We gotta have to show the full amount here. That's going to be a little bit of a challenge. And then finally at the bottom, you have I, which is a cost of a subtotal of these costs. So you see that if there were any lender credits on the loan, if there were premium pricing and there was a credit going back to the borrower to pay some of these costs, that credit would show right here and reduce that $8,054 by the amount of that credit. Then you have the calculation of cash to close. Again, you'd have any credits coming from the seller would show here. And this estimated cash to close, $16,504. If you turn back to the first page, you'll see it matches that page. Page 3. Now we get into some additional information at the very top of the form. We have the lender, creditor information again. But now we would have any mortgage broker information would be here. Both the mortgage broker name and the company NMLS number, as well as the individual originator, their NMLS number. I always have trouble saying that. Their email and their phone number. And that ends the presentation. Time for break. There we go. So now the next little section are some comparison data, and there's some new information in here. First we have to show the total interest, the total payments for 5 years, totally paid in principal, interest, mortgage insurance, and loan costs, and the amount of principal that they have paid off on their loan. The APR now shows here, so that the truth of lending form is gone. Till now shows here. And there's a new calculation called total interest percentage, or TIP. So here's the formula. Everybody, you know your borrowers are going to want to know this vital data. It's the total interest paid over the life of the loan divided by the loan amount. So those of you that are ADD like me said, well, I want to figure this out. So I took the P&I payment times 360. I subtracted the loan amount, said, all right, there's my interest paid. Divided it by the loan amount, I could not match that number. Well, but you got to think about it. You got to back up a page, because if you go over here, right here. Whoop, where'd it go? There it is. Prepaid interest, $17.44 a day for 15 days, $262. When I added that in, then I matched that number. So if you get if you're doing a loan for an engineer from IBM or Apple or whoever, they're going to want to know. So that's how you figure it out. Then at the bottom, some more disclosures. Appraisal basically said they get a copy of the appraisal. Is your loan assumable? No. Homeowners insurance? Yes, you need some. Is there a late payment? And when it's charged and how much it is. Refinances. Yes, you can refinance, but don't count on it. Servicing. Don't you think we all should have had that disclosure in 2007? And servicing, do we tend to service or do we transfer at all? But why this is important is if we list these people, these providers, if they select somebody that we've listed here, which they certainly can do, then we have a 10% tolerance on our quote. I.e., if we're telling them to use this, they can use a service provider, then we should know what those fees are. If they select somebody not on this list, then there is no limit on the tolerance. So if we provide a service provider list prior to having the loan, the purchase contract, and we say, just name your name, I'm not advocating anybody. If we say Fidelity National Title, and they pick, Stewart Title and a local settlement agent, hey, that's fine, but then we just use their fees, and of course there's no limit on any variance to that quote. That's very important. The other thing, if you look at this, you've got it there in the handout. Obviously, it's the service provider, the estimate of that cost, the name of the provider, and then contact information. And you need to provide